was supposed to be just another school day. The halls were alive with chatter, the smell of cafeteria food wafting through the air. I was sitting in my history class, half listening to Mr. Hargrove drone on about ancient civilizations. Just then, the loudspeakers crackled, and the principal's voice echoed through the building. "Attention students and staff, we are going into lockdown. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." Panic rippled through the classroom. Mr. Hargrove moved quickly, pushing the heavy wooden desk against the door and instructing us to hide in the corner. My heart raced as I squeezed in between Sarah and Jeremy, both of them wide-eyed with fear. A lockdown was unusual, especially one declared so suddenly. "Do you think it's real?" Sarah whispered, her voice shaky. I couldn't find the words, so I just nodded. The moments dragged on, each ticking second amplifying our dread. Outside, murmurs and footsteps slipped through the cracks of the door, but they seemed different now, more urgent, as if someone was running, searching. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the hallway, and we all froze. The atmosphere shifted, tension thick in the air. I glanced around the room, noticing for the first time the small details, the scuffed floors, the ominous map of the school on the back wall, the way shadows danced just beyond the flickering fluorescent lights. Another crash erupted, louder this time. "It's probably just a false alarm," Jeremy ventured, but his voice lacked conviction. I could see him sweating, the way his hands trembled slightly. Outside, sounds of shouting began to intermingle with what I thought I heard, a whimpering perhaps. I strained to listen, trying to separate fear from reality. Time was slipping through my fingers like sand. The principal's voice returned, shaky now. "Stay hidden! Do not open the doors!" More heavy footsteps thundered past our room, and I caught glimpses of dark figures moving in and out of the shadows. A cold sweat trickled down my spine. There were moments of silence, and then, eerily, the footsteps became softer, almost as if they were lingering, waiting, stalking. Then, a distinct voice broke through the chilling quiet. It was a girl's voice, soft, calling for help. I remembered Rebecca from the grade below us. She'd been out sick the last couple of weeks. She sounded close, her pleas filled with desperation. My instincts screamed at me to stay put, but another part, driven by the need to help, fought for control. "No!" Mr. Hargrove barked suddenly, his eyes wild. "We have to stay here." But the curiosity crept in, gnawing at my resolve. Just then the classroom door rattled, sending my heart into my throat. My breath caught, the hairs on my arms standing erect. There was a fleeting shadow outside the door, then someone knocking, soft but deliberate. "Please, let me in! It's me, Rebecca!" I felt my resolve shatter. I stood up, moving toward the door without thinking. My hands trembled as I reached for the handle. I glanced back at Mr. Hargrove, who looked terrified. "We can't," he hissed. But I was already unlocking it. The door swung open with an unsettling creak, and there stood Rebecca, eyes wide, her face pale and gleaming with fear. She staggered in, barely avoiding crashing into me. She was trembling, muttering, "They're here. They're trying to get in." It took only seconds before we heard more footsteps, louder this time. Mr. Hargrove rushed to lock the door again, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged as the lock jammed, and I turned back to see Rebecca staring at me. But something was off. Her eyes glimmered strangely, like a predator watching its prey. "Rebecca!" I stepped back, unease creeping up my spine. "What happened?" "They didn't find me," she whispered. Then her voice dipped dangerously low. "But they're coming for you now." As her words hung in the air, the door finally burst open, and in came not just the shadows, but those dark figures we had feared. But in that moment of chaos, I realized Rebecca was neither a victim nor a friend. She was part of the terror, and as the figures converged on us, I was left alone, gripped by the knowledge that the real nightmare had only just begun. As the figures flooded into the room, the atmosphere thickened with a palpable dread. My heart pounded in my chest as I instinctively backed away from Rebecca, whose once familiar face had twisted into a mask of eerie delight. The shadows around her shifted and writhed, drawing closer as the figures moved like smoke, indistinct, yet undeniably menacing. Mr. Hargrove stood frozen in place, eyes darting from the encroaching figures to Rebecca, the terror etched on his features, a mirror of my own. It was as if the room had warped into a living nightmare, and the air felt charged with a dark energy. I was out of time, and options slipped through my fingers like grains of sand. "Help us!" I shouted, trying to summon some defiance, but my voice faltered, drowned out by the slow, rhythmic creaking of the doorframe as the shadows pushed through, unfazed and unyielding. Rebecca's smile widened, revealing teeth far too sharp for comfort. "They only want to play," she hissed, her voice melding with the hushed whispers surrounding us. Each syllable slithered like a serpent, instilling a deep, unwavering terror. "But you can't escape." The figures slipped inside, cloaked in darkness, blending seamlessly with the shadows of the classroom. I could barely make out their faces, if they had any, because they seemed to absorb the light, making them harder to focus on. I glanced back at Sarah and Jeremy. Their faces reflected sheer horror as they quietly urged me to run. Time seemed to fracture as the figures slowly advanced, their elongated fingers reaching out, and the whispers crescendoed into a desperate chorus. I fought against the crushing weight of fear, urging me to remain still, my muscles poised for flight even as dread anchored me in place. "Why are you doing this?" I cried, my voice cracking, desperation pushing me forward. The room felt smaller as the figures surrounded us, their inky forms beckoning with twisted gestures. "Because you are ours now," a voice whispered, but it wasn't any of the figures or Rebecca. It came from the very walls, the ceiling, even the floor. It resonated with a deep reverberation, a sound that thrummed through my bones. Suddenly the lights flickered violently, plunging us into darkness before stealing it back again, each oscillation revealing more of the figures. Pandemonium erupted. Sarah screamed, and I grabbed her hand, yanking her toward the window. "Go! We have to get out!" But just as we reached the glass, it shattered outward, a violent explosion that sent shards flying like deadly confetti. The sound drowned out Rebecca's laughter, a shrill, haunting melody that echoed through my skull. We tumbled outside, but the world around us had shifted. The schoolyard was cloaked in gray mist, and the familiar facade of our school became something grotesque, a twisted version of itself, with mockingly warped geometry and echoing silence. I spun around, looking for a way back in, but the door was gone, leaving no trace. "Where are we?" Jeremy stammered, glancing around as if expecting someone to jump out from the shadows. "The school. It's not what it seems," I said, dread creeping up my spine as I recalled Rebecca's words, how they had twisted around my mind like a vine, choking the life from a tree. "It's a trap. And they're not done with us yet." The figures materialized out of the fog, whispering secrets that sent chills rippling through my skin. They closed in with a hypnotic grace, and I suddenly understood. This was just the beginning of their game. No one could escape the realities they had crafted. As they reached out, I felt the edges of my consciousness begin to dull. With one last look at Sarah and Jeremy, I saw their eyes cloud over, and I knew. A cold thought like ice settled in my veins. Once you entered their realm, you became part of the nightmare. It felt like I was being erased, piece by piece, until the only thing that remained was a haunting echo of what was once me. There, in that chilling abyss, I finally grasped the truth. The lockdown had just begun.